Thanks for joining us, Alicia Thompson and MaryEllen Elia. For anyone out there who may not know who you are and what you're up to these days, I think it'd be great if you could give a little intro in that regard. So maybe MaryEllen, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Pleasure to be here with both of you, Alicia and Todd. I am a longtime educator. I've been a teacher as well as a curriculum leader for many years. I served as a superintendent in the seventh largest district in the country in Hillsborough County Public Schools in Florida for 10 years. And then I was the New York State Commissioner of Education for 5 years. And since then, I've been working as a mentor and a coach for superintendents and educational leaders, and started my own company, Success for Students. And we have all, as educators, gone through some tough times. And so I think we all need to be working together to support educators across this country. So it's a pleasure to be here to talk about teachers and teacher retention and what we can do to support them.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, MaryEllen, and Todd as well. My name is Alicia Thompson, and I am retired in July was my first day of retirement, July 1. So I'm looking forward to my new adventures. But I am an educator of 31 years from the Wichita Public Schools, which is in Wichita, Kansas. A side note, I started my career as a kindergarten student in this district as well. So I was a student in this district and moved my way up. This school district here serves about 50,000 students. I started in my profession in the district as a paraprofessional. I was a teacher, a coach, assistant principal, executive director of professional learning and school improvement, 10 years as an assistant sup, and then 8 years as the superintendent of this school district. And my passion is really building leadership capacity and ensuring that all kids have access to a quality education.
Yeah, so thank you for alluding to the topic that we're going to discuss is really about teacher burnout, teacher retention, and certainly I think maybe attracting new teachers is an element that's included in burnout and retention. And I think I'd just ask a question that's very broad. What is the first thing that comes to mind for each of you when we're thinking about teacher burnout, teacher retention?
Well, I think one of the big issues that we are facing is in this post-pandemic period, there are so many different models and so many different approaches that are being taken across the country to come back successfully. And I think that teachers have families too. They have stresses in their lives as well, and all of those things have influenced them as well as the students that are sitting in their classrooms. So in terms of some of the issues that teachers are facing, this is just a very difficult time in American education. And teachers are the ones that are going to make it work or not.
Yeah, thanks, MaryEllen. And you brought up the pandemic, and it's hard not to when we're talking about almost anything in terms of the repercussions and the aftermath. And do you feel, though, that the pandemic has caused the vast amounts of, and it's hard, we're all guessing, but like the vast amounts of teachers leaving the profession?
Well, let me tell you, I think we've got a long road to go to get back to where we need to be. But even before the pandemic, when I was commissioner in New York State, we were working with the union to support teachers and to figure out ways that we could increase the number of students from our high schools going into the teaching profession. And really, when you think about it, and we actually did surveys, the reason that kids were going into that profession was because they were hearing from their teachers how difficult it was. So this isn't something that's brand new. Did the pandemic affect it greatly? I think it did. But I think, this is a core issue that we really need to address.
Thank you. Alicia, what comes to your mind?
It needs attention, but we need to have strategy, right? We need to build a strong strategy across the country on the ways in which we're going to be able to bring back the attractiveness of being a teacher in the United States. But I do see that there's opportunities here to not only uh, bring back our teachers, but to strengthen the profession and make it better for our teachers and for our students. And I know that we're going to spend some time, I'm sure, talking about what some of those challenges are. But the first thing that comes to my mind is it needs attention. We need to have strategy, and it needs to be urgent, but that there are opportunities for us to be able to improve the quality of our profession and the services that we provide to our students.
So let's talk about those challenges and what causes teacher burnout. And certainly pandemic, you mentioned, MaryEllen, but like what's causing this burnout and therefore a challenge in terms of retention?
We've not taken a lot of things off of the teacher's plate. And that in and of itself is a challenge. The systems that we use with the technology that's available aren't always as efficient as they could be. And I would say if you talk to a faculty of teachers in a school and you ask them, list for me 5 things that you would like to not have to do because you're doing things with your students, we have to be that kind of proactive and figure out, okay, if they don't want to do this, and it's pretty substantially the whole population of teachers in that school, what can we do to solve that problem? Seems that as challenges come, no matter where you are in the school system, teachers get the brunt of that challenge to try to solve it. And they have risen to the occasion. But we've got to become more efficient, more supportive, and more focused on, I think, as Alicia pointed out, supporting teachers and having a strategy in place to make sure they want to stay in the profession and they don't want to leave after their first 5 or 6 years.
As I think about that, MaryEllen, I think about also the political climate and some of the negative rhetoric around public education. I hear sometimes teachers say, well, I'm afraid to be creative and innovative sometimes because I'm afraid that I'm going to offend someone, or I'm going to lose my job because I'm using certain books or materials in the classroom. And that puts wear and tear and stress on the teachers, right along with the student behavior that we are seeing a rise in that student behavior in the classroom. That's one of the issues that are causing the burnout in the classrooms. And not only the student behavior, but the parent engagement and the support that the parents give to the teachers or not give to the teachers when they're having difficulties with their student and really being that partner that we need. And that's not all. And I'm not stereotyping, but that is an issue that you continue to hear pretty consistent inside. And the parents are doing the best that they can, but it is an issue when they don't have that strong partnership. And then I also think of mental health supports, not only for the teachers but also for the students. And so we've got to get a strategy, a robust strategy on how to really work through those pieces. And of course, the one that is really at the bottom, because as you talk to teachers, it's not always their number one thing, but that financial compensation also is important for retaining and recruiting teachers and more people into the profession.
Yeah, it's a challenge everywhere, right? I mean, as I said, it's across the board, no matter what the size of the district, no matter what the challenges of the district, or the student population, doesn't make any difference. Everybody's facing those same issues.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, not to sound crass, but that the schools are not a place to leave your child for a day and hope that they're just taken care of. It's a place where kids learn social skills. It's a place where they get academic skills. It's a place where they become young adults. And I think that parents, not all parents, of course, but there's a large chunk of parents, large population of parents where I do believe they believe it's somebody else's job, the school's job, to raise their kid. And certainly there should be a partnership. And I think there's a lack of partnering and seeing a teacher as the partner, not somebody you drop your kid off during the day to. So I really believe that as well, Alicia. I appreciate that. What are you seeing that's working? Like and it doesn't have to be a location, but what are the practices that certain schools, school districts, even states, MaryEllen, that where you see the right partnerships, supportive partnerships between parents and schools, or the right ways in which we support and professionalize, or let's say reprofessionalize the art and science of teaching. What are you seeing out there that seems to be working, where teachers are happy, supported, wanting to stick around for 30 years or more?
Well, I think one of the things is that leaders who give teachers the opportunity to be part of the decision making in a school and or in a district, and teachers having the ability to design the work that they're doing in their classroom for success for the students that they have in front of them. And I think, too often we want to say, this is what you're going to do. This is the curriculum you're going to follow. And some of those practices are, I think, stifling to teachers who want to get into the classroom with their students and really help them to learn. Now, there has to be some structures. I understand that. I know Alicia does, I'm sure, too. As a superintendent, you know that. But I think having teachers be part of the decision-making of things that are going on in the schools, and my example of saying to the teachers in a school, what are 5 things that I can help you take off your load so that you can be as productive as possible? I think that's an important strategy. Another thing that's very successful for those districts that start and kind of do a grow your own, you have programs in middle school that you can start that actually are part of a curriculum where students are working with younger students, and then you move that program into high school. Kids can take some of their college coursework while they're in high school to ultimately become a teacher. And so you actually are working with them to define some of the positive strategies and the keys to success in a classroom with students who ultimately will be your new teachers.
MaryEllen, I appreciate that you brought that up. What are we doing at the teacher ed level in universities? There's a wonderful group of, I think they're up to maybe 25, 30 deans of schools of education. But when I was at the University of Virginia as a research professor, Dean Pianta for the Curry School of Education started Deans for Change, Deans for Impact. And these are deans, College of Education deans, who have said, it's broken. We can't be so clinical. We can't all be in classrooms teaching teachers what it's really like to be a teacher. It has to be far more field-based and not just your last semester when you're doing your teacher practicum. So I hopefully will see some significant change in teacher ed as we move forward. But what are you seeing out there, Alicia, that you think is working or you know is working?
Yeah. So some of the are similar to MaryEllen, creating advisory groups that meet on a regular basis with teachers, and because their voices need to be heard to help solve this problem. But we also must create that safe space for teachers to feel comfortable sharing with us the information that we need in order to be able to change the trajectory and encourage more folks to come in to the profession. And then again, I've watched some schools that have created surveys that gives opportunities for regular feedback. But on the other hand, they're not just getting the feedback, because no one likes to give the feedback and then there's no action from the feedback. So making sure that there's some actionable things that are taking place. So again, as MaryEllen said, teachers feel part of the decision making and the opportunities to build what's happening in the school district that they work in. Again, taking things off of the teacher's plate, I won't reiterate, but MaryEllen is right on target there. The workload is heavy, and so they definitely need that opportunity. The more that I have seen is celebrating teachers and staff publicly. We do all the internal things to celebrate teachers and make them feel, but the community and businesses also need to be part of celebrating the profession and celebrating the teachers and the accomplishments that are happening within the school district. And I'll just repeat one other, and that's the physical and mental health of teachers. What school districts offer them as it relates to how they are, how their well-being is taken care of within the district is also very important to teachers as you hear them talk about their mental capacity to be able to serve students, because we know that the teachers are not physically and mentally ready to accept those little honeys when they come in. We have lots of issues. So we definitely need to make sure that there's infrastructure within a school district to support the well-being mentally and physically of the teachers that we serve. And then, of course, the last is the advocate. You got to go out and advocate for funds and other ways in which you can compensate teachers in our school districts.
You were both, and very recently, in your case in particular, Alicia, superintendents. Yeah, you probably haven't already forgotten. It's only been a few weeks for you since you left Wichita. But what does a superintendent do? Like, what would you? You're both coaching superintendents these days, and like, what would you recommend to them when they come to you and say, "We are a sieve of talent." We are leaking teachers. They are leaving. We're having it. We can blame the pipeline. You know, that university of whatever is not, our local university is not providing enough new teachers. What would you suggest to them? And I think it goes back to some of the things you just shared, but like, as a superintendent, what do you suggest they do to address the issues?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting, that some of the things that our department used to work on, people usually do exit surveys. You know, you revisit with people when they exit out of your school district to, just to talk about their experience and that kind of thing. You're gathering data. What we did in our school districts is we just did a why do you stay survey, right? So we take the data that we're receiving from why do you stay in the school district, and we utilize the data there to really begin to address the culture, the environment in which people want to work. There are lots of young people. You talk to them all the time. They want to make a difference. They want to be in a job that makes them feel good about what they're doing when they work in there every day. And education is definitely one of those fields. So as your teachers begin to feel good about the environment that they're working in, they're going to be champions. So what we do is we also have champion teachers that are out championing your school district and saying, hey, this is a great place to work here. The cool things that, so it's not the administrators being the ones to go out and recruit and champion. It is the teachers themselves. And I also believe what MaryEllen talked about was that you've got to start that pipeline. And I understand that a lot of people may not have those. But if you are in a classroom and you're teaching middle school kids or elementary kids, and they're excited about their learning and they want to give back, they can see their teachers as role models and mentors and moving, maybe even thinking about that type of career. If the teacher is that champion and is really showing that this is a valuable and tangible profession to really be in. So the advice that I would get is work on your culture in your school district, because if you have a really good culture in your school district and you have pride in your school district, and people treat each other with dignity and respect, and will listen to each other and are responding to the needs of what happens in our school district, you're going to have happy employees, right? When you have happy employees, they go out and tell others about how happy and what a great profession they work in, which is contagious. So I would say that that's one thing, besides all the other things that we talked about, that a superintendent could do in order to be able to help at least attract teachers and things of that nature into their school districts.
I think one other thing that was very successful when I was working in Hillsborough as superintendent, we worked on a very large grant that supported teacher evaluation. Now, people think evaluation is always a negative. That's not the case. In fact, we actually found that the support for teachers increased when we put in place certain factors. One of them was having every new teacher in the district have a mentor. And that mentor was a qualified teacher in the same field that they taught, or the same grade level that they taught in, and they were a person who was released from their duties as a teacher in the classroom to be the mentor for the teachers that they had assigned to them. They would go to their classroom, they'd be at the end of a cell phone, calls so that if a teacher left the classroom and they were upset because it was not a good day. And I think we all, if you've been in teaching, you know there are some days that are not good days. And you've got to have somebody that you can talk to and share and strategize on how to have fewer bad days in the classroom. And so I think having supports for teachers in place that they feel comfortable with would decrease that strategy or that the data that we have that says teachers are leaving after 5 or 6 years because they just didn't feel fulfilled and they didn't feel like they were doing a good job. It really changes when you have somebody that you can trust who is going to support you and give you strategies as you're going through it.
MaryEllen, I'm going to even take yours even further. While we have the mentor teachers, we also have the new teacher orientation, which we extend for year 1 and year 2. And next year, they're building year 3. So what happens is those teachers have a mentor and they come out 4 times a year and even have after school activities also where new teachers come and gather together and vent, get new strategies, ideas. But then we also have the formalized one 4 times a year where they come out and they have opportunities to get more classroom management activities, just to meet new other teachers, to collaborate even within your grade level, your level, whether it's secondary or, so we have those built in as well. So not only do you have the mentor, you also get to come out and see others outside of your mentorship. And you just are the same year, first year teachers together. And then you have opportunities after school for more of that social, get to know one another, kind of build camaraderie with each other as well. So there's another layer to that also is very helpful to retain teachers. And what she's talking about, what you're talking about, MaryEllen, there's lots of data out there that says these strategies that we're talking about here are some of the higher yield strategies that get the better outcome with retention and recruitment of teachers.
Yeah, a great met. I remember Jeff. I was terrified my first year as barely a 22-year-old teaching, 28 fifth graders. I was terrified, and Jeff was a fifth grade teacher down the hall and was just incredibly supportive. Probably had 20 years of experience, and just again, whether it's just having somebody to speak with, let alone somebody who can say, no, here's how I would teach that lesson, and here's how I'd build that assessment. And again, the mentorship coaches, instructional coaches is another kind of support, I believe is some of the best kind of support that whether you're a first year teacher or a 25-year veteran could be really helpful. Well, Pete, have you heard this term and this is research supported as well from surveys, that people don't leave businesses, they leave their manager. In the end, a teacher is not accountable necessarily to their instructional coach or their mentor. They're accountable to their manager, the person who does their reviews and so forth, and potentially hires them. And that is the school principal. And I'm a licensed school principal, never been one, but went through the program. Not a whole lot around how do you support people, employees, what drives employees, what's the appropriate way to engage them, and so forth. Certainly some learning, but not a whole lot of practice. What are your thoughts on the principalship and them as a lever for retaining and supporting teachers?
I think let me say this, and I saw this. It's in the research, but it's also in the reality. And as a superintendent, I saw lots of times when a very effective principal could be in any school, one of the most difficult schools to run or one of the less difficult schools to run. And if they were good and they had a reputation with teachers in the district, they always could fill the openings they had at their school. And if a great principal was assigned to another school, their best teachers would go with them. And it is the reality. And that just shows why it's so critical to take people who are successful as principals and have them be peers and mentors for the other principals. So If you have a principal in an elementary area that is really great and everybody loves them, and you try to figure out, well, okay, I want to have a school like that, they need to be the leaders and the supporters for other principals. Because I know it happened in my district. I'm sure it probably happened in yours, Alicia. Principals can write their ticket with the teachers that they get because they will follow them anywhere. And when you look at the national surveys that are done on teachers to see, okay, what's going on in this field of teaching, money is not the highest thing that they want. They want support in that profession as a teacher, and they get that from principals that know what they're doing and know how to lead with a great culture and support. So, I mean, that is something that has been around for a long time, and I think you have a whole lot of savvy superintendents who are starting to realize, I've got to take my great principals and not take them out of the class, not take them out of the principalship, but have them share those activities that they're doing of making success in their schools.
And MaryEllen, which is interesting you say that, we actually build that into our principals academies, building effective cultures, and how do you treat and how do you build relationships with the adults? Because while I agree with you, we need to, that we need to leave those people in the buildings. But as we get new ones that may struggle a little bit in that area, we have to provide the professional development for those folks and the opportunity to shadow and mentor the ones that have it. You know what I'm saying? And see how that's working and build that capacity again with those ones that need that additional support. But when we do hiring, we actually talk to them a little. Some of the questions that we ask is all about that culture and how, and doing different scenarios of how they would treat certain situations with their employees and so on and so forth, because that is the number one break of why people leave their profession, in my opinion, because they don't have the support, and the environment and the culture in the building or even in a school district is not in alignment with what people want to work in. And so I would recommend too that as you look at your principal trainings that you continue to do, I know principals meet weekly, monthly, or however they meet, but whenever they're meeting with their principals, there always need to be some type of professional opportunities for them to learn and really build their capacity around cultural work within their buildings.
I still remember my the first principal, Daniel Ryan, in Hinsdale, Illinois. And the reason I had some opportunities, there were a lot of openings in the Chicago area, and I was absolutely fortunate enough to teach my first few years under Daniel Ryan. And evaluation was a big thing, teacher effectiveness, not just teacher quality. Never felt, anytime when he came into my room, I welcomed him. I didn't feel like it was a microscope. And I always knew he'd have 3 great things to say that he saw in my classroom and 1 suggestion, but never felt it was punitive in any way. It's just it's a tough job, as we all know, and you folks have had this role, but also one that could be instrumental in again, addressing teacher burnout, hopefully addressing teacher supports and so forth, but also the retention issue. We're going to wrap up now in terms of just what other comments would you have, or suggestions or thoughts around, again, teacher burnout and teacher retention as we close here. And I'm putting you on the spot a little here, MaryEllen, but what are your closing thoughts?
We have to recognize that this is a issue that probably without interventions, some of the things we've talked about today, it's not going to go away. And we have to be looking at what we need to do across all states, all districts, to support teachers. And there are many ways to do that. I think we've mentioned a lot of them here. And I think the important point is, we can't just let it go and think that it's going to solve its own problems. It's not going to happen. We have a lot of students who have great needs. We've got to start being smart about the use of technology, smart about the ways that we can connect teachers to resources, and smart about the ways that we create that culture of support. But until we realize and respect teachers as really designers of what is successful in classrooms and in schools, we're going to have a very difficult time building the workforce that we need. And so I think this is one of the challenges that educators are going to face for many years and have been facing. I mean, it isn't just brought on by the pandemic. This is an issue that people have had in districts and in states across the country. But the one thing we get back to, one of the most important things that happened every day in classrooms with teachers. And without the right teacher in front of the students, they are going to have a difficult time, and we've got to stop that and support teachers so that they can be what every student needs.
Everything has to be intentional about this. We cannot, as she said, you just can't just keep talking about it. You've got to have some actions. One of the things that before I retired, we actually, and we're getting ready to rebuild, they were rebuilding the strategic plan for next year. And one of the pieces that we left, and for sure it's going to be on this next reiteration, is part of the strategic plan. We only have 3 goals, but one of those goals is going to be retention and recruitment of teachers. And what happens is when we have that strategy as a district, all of the schools align to those 3 goals, right? So as a district, what are we doing in the building? What are we doing before the building? What are we doing as the district? What are those strategies that are underneath those goals of retention and recruitment that we, as not just the superintendent, not just the principals, but the teachers and the students, what are we all going to do to work towards, in our community as well? What are we all going to do in the area of recruitment and retention and burnout of teachers and staff? Not just the teachers, but all of the staff within the school district. And that is how intentional school districts and communities need to be in order to be able to really tackle this really the crisis that we're having in regards to teacher burnout and retention. And so as my last words would just be intentional to that level, to that specificity of everything that you do is going to, in your district, how is this going to help us with our goal of retaining retention of teachers? How are we recruiting them? And how are we decreasing the burnout that our teachers and staff are having in the building? Be intentional. That's all I can say, and have a strategy that you are focused on and you're collecting data around so that you can tackle the issue.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you, MaryEllen. And not to end on a down note, but I am now recalling specifically the statistic and the study that came out last year by AACTE, so the American Association for Colleges of Teacher Education, found that between 2008 and 2019, that the percentage of the drop in the number of students completing their teacher ed program and hopefully going into teaching dropped by a third, 30%. That is enormous. And now we're experiencing that. In addition to pandemic people leaving the profession, the pipeline ain't looking great. So I can't stress enough the suggestions you have for retention, but also some of the suggestions you have about making teaching a place and a profession that truly is a profession and always has been, but one that where you can spend 30 years of your career loving it and retiring knowing that you had an impact on literally hundreds of lives, which is really a special thing that not a lot of people who have jobs in America or anywhere else can say. So teaching is a profession and it's a very noble one. So thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to our future conversations. Thanks, Alicia and MaryEllen.